Recording. And we are live. Welcome to the open episode 50 for not even for Patreon. It's the open episode. But if you want to get more content, we just recorded a great episode on where the American right is on the war in Ukraine. So go to patreon.com/RINOpod, only $1 a month. Totally worth it to get insight onto that side of the aisle, because our side of the aisle has the debate, we have the discussion, we have the argument, and the left just gets in line. All right, Kaitlin. I will say I did not think Vladimir Putin would invade Ukraine. I thought it was saber rattling and a bluff. I was wrong. I'm sad that I'm wrong.
Yeah. You don't want to be wrong.
I don't want to be wrong on that. I thought he wouldn't do it because, well, one, a lot of the things that are currently happening now are the types of things I was sort of warning and guarding against, that you just in the fog of war, you think it's going to go one way and it doesn't go that way at all. People thought Kiev, and I'm still saying Kiev, not Kyiv. I don't know when that took place. We don't say Roma, we say Rome. When people said Kiev was going to fall within 24 hours, and they're still standing. Zelensky's still there.
They put up a historic resistance. Yeah. It's been extraordinary to watch. The bravery of President, I'd butcher his first name, but President Zelensky has been just incredible. Incredible. And we're not talking about those pictures that everyone's all pissed off about. We're talking about the video of him in Kiev with military and civilians who are getting guns. We have that video coverage of him. He's addressed the nation. He keeps updating people.
Keeps letting people know he's alive, which is important, and he's there in Kiev. It's not a fake video or anything like that. Yeah,
the United States was offering to evacuate him before the invasion last week, and I posted. I was like, this would be the wrong decision. You need to stay and defend your homeland. You need to be strong for your people. And he's doing that. It's been, honestly, it's heart. It takes my breath away at the bravery to just do that, to stand up to Russian aggression like.
Yeah, it does take bravery. Unlike, and we have an example days earlier of the actual cowardice of weak people like Justin Trudeau, who, when truckers did a peaceful protest, had to get the fuck out of Ottawa because he was so scared. How pathetic a man that is. Like, how pathetic are you? Castro's illegitimate child, to cower. I mean, to cower from a peaceful trucker protest compared to what's going on in Ukraine, and the true bravery and courage it takes to stand there and go, okay, this might be my last night on earth, but I'm going down swinging. Wow.
I don't think there's any binary thinking on that, right, Jeff? The Russian government is putting down anti-war protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg and arresting a lot of protesters. And the reason why Justin Trudeau's actions in putting together that emergency and putting forth that emergency, the reason why that matters is because this matters. What Putin is doing to his own people in Moscow and putting down peaceful protest in Moscow and St. Petersburg, that matters. So this matters. Okay. So when we have Western nations doing that, that's enraging, and it's good to call it out. It is good. I don't see how anyone can have such binary thinking where they have to care about one or the other. You can care about both.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct. To those on the right, and it was especially on the right, when you heard that, I saw it across from it.
From David French. It was David French
who called it out.
No, David French, who said, why should I care more about what's happening in Canada over what's happening in Russia? there,
Well,
the thing.
Conversely, there were people who said, why should I care more about what's happening in Ukraine than what's happening in Canada? Because they're more pissed at it. Like locally, I think I got into a little bit with Turtle Boy Sports, Aiden over there, because like he has a big following. But that's coming from like Tucker. That's coming from Sorab. The idea that like, well, let's, take care of Drag Queen Story Hour first. And, if we have time, maybe deal with the Russian invasion of a sovereign nation. So you're right. You're right. We can do that's right. No more binary thinking. Like lots of things happen in our lives that we have to handle all at the same time. And this is one of them. And you're unserious. You become an unserious person the more and more you buy into the Putin talking points. And it's I'll tell you, the bravery I've seen from Russian citizens who are going out and protesting, because let me tell you something right there. You go out in America, you're going to protest, if you're peaceful, you're pretty much going to be okay. Maybe if you're not peaceful, you'll get arrested and then let go by one of the district attorneys that's appointed in one of our major cities. In Canada, acting more like an authoritarian nation, you get your bank account seized.
Freezing your bank account.
But in Russia, they'll arrest you, disappear. You'll disappear. Your family will be retaliated against. There's a tennis player, Andrei Rublev, very good tennis player, top 5 in the world, who has just, I wouldn't call it a protest, but just has spoken out against the war. And that's brave, man. He's a high-profile guy. He's a top-tier athlete, and he's just saying.
He wrote that message on the camera lens. That was awesome. Yeah. I think that we can get into what's currently happening right now, sanction-wise, and all of that stuff, and what Putin is doing. So essentially, after you and I had our podcast on Sunday, he moved more troops to the border of Ukraine. On Wednesday, he announced. On Wednesday, was it Wednesday or Tuesday? I'm trying to think. That
thing with all of his advisors. Well, they're saying that was recorded days earlier, and they cut it together and they released it. It was made to look like a live event, but there's little things like you look at the watches of all the participants, including Putin, of when it was supposed to be broadcast compared to what the actual time was on their watch, and none of them matched. Right. So there was serious editing that might have taken them a few days to splice it together and make it look like it was a live event of what would justify. Well, So they declare these 2 breakaway regions
independent of Ukraine. And that Ukraine is committing a genocide in both regions. And then Putin did a speech that basically, again, gave his worldview. Okay. He thinks that these former Soviet satellites that were part of the greater Russian Empire, they're Russian. He thinks that they're Russian, and he wants to bring them back into Russia. Okay. It's basically a Sudetenland speech. It was very similar to that. If anyone doesn't know what Sudetenland means, it means the Lebensraum for that Hitler.
Right. All German speaking lands actually belong to Germany, which was his justification for going into Austria-Hungary. Yeah.
Czechoslovakia too. And so that's essentially what Putin is putting forth. That's one of his justifications of going into Ukraine. Ukraine has a sizable chunk of Russians, ethnic Russians that live in Ukraine. And the thing is that when they went in, so on Thursday, we get the reports that everything's getting ready to go. They're going in. And no one still knew what was going on at the time. And then we all automatically heard of bombings and explosions happening in Kiev. And then Putin came out and said, if the West retaliates or in any way, I will use powers that you have not seen before. That was a scary statement. And so I was depressed, Jeff, because I understand the military capability of the Russian military. They have a lot of weapons. They have a lot of tech. That doesn't mean, and as we've seen over time, that they've been capable. Okay, right now they basically want to set up a bridge between Crimea and these two separatist regions. They might hold that. They haven't been able to take. Is it Krakow? I'm butchering that name. The oblast.
Yeah.
In Ukraine, they have not been able to take that major city, and they have not been able to advance towards Kiev. And Kiev is right outside of the Chernobyl exclusion point. They utilize the Belarusian border going into Ukraine in order to get those tanks across
by Belarus.
And they took actually the staff that were working at Chernobyl hostage. And that is actually very important. That Chernobyl plant, it's been decommissioned, but there's still radiation in that. And the world is actually paid for some hoods to go onto it to protect the world from the radiation of that decommissioning and the accident that happened there. So radiation went into the atmosphere. I don't know if they're still under hostage or they're allowing them to at least work and do their job to keep people safe. But it doesn't seem like we got any update on that. So it seems like maybe that could have happened.
Well, I am concerned because what you're recapping is, we are hearing about the good stories and Zelensky and them not taking Kiev and a lot of that, but also it's harder to find where the Russians have been succeeding, coming up from the south in Crimea, and that's a bit more murky to me how far that advances. Now,
it seems like the only advancements they have been able to make are on the south, and what you don't want them to happen is them to essentially encircle these two major cities in Kiev. And I'm going to butcher the name again. Is it Krakow?
Close enough, yeah.
I'm totally awful with Russian names. I apologize. I have a good friend who is actually Russian. She's freaking out about this because she has family in Ukraine. And so, again, this is Russia fighting its own brother, essentially. And so the Russian army, I think, has no morale. It does not have a purpose. These are 19-year-olds going into Ukraine with no real purpose for what they're doing. They have family members in Ukraine. They view it as a brother. And so, but the Ukrainians themselves see the Russian aggression and they're fighting for their lives. So they've put up a heroic defense. I mean, the Russians should have taken Ukraine by now. They were expecting Zelensky to escape. They were expecting these major cities to collapse. They were expecting the government to collapse, and it didn't happen.
So what I wonder is how long this can last. I don't, as people correctly have said, nobody knows what's going to happen when this started on Thursday, and clearly it hasn't gone as a lot of people predicted.
Well, we haven't had a war in a long time, Jeff. I mean,
this is a real war. This is real war.
This is. I mean, we had 90s Serbia, but that's a completely different situation where there was like legit ethnic cleansing going on, and like that was legit. Like this is a completely different situation. We have not seen this type of European land war in a long, long time. Before I was born.
I don't know that. Say that they hold up a good defense and they don't take Kiev, and do the Russians just hold the southern and eastern parts, and then what happens then? And it's like an uneasy tension, and they've just gained territory, and then they slowly make a push and eventually consume it, because that's the type of stuff where you have to speculate,
right?
Not on what's going to happen, but what.
I think that's a reasonable point.
Yeah.
I think that I am hoping. Well, because I think that questions of rationality with Putin right now are reasonable, because he is threatening nuclear war on the West. I mean, we've been threatened twice in the last week. Okay, he's putting up nuclear defenses as a deterrent, and says that if we get involved or anything like that. The thing is if Putin is stupid or a Russian troop is dumb, they attack a NATO ally, Article 5 gets invoked and we're in it. And so we don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. If anything, I am hoping that we just keep sending the Ukrainian military a bunch of weapons.
Well, what's amazing
they take care of this themselves until Russia is just done. Okay, and they're defeated.
The technology that exists now, amazingly, is like, yes, they have Russian air superiority. Supposedly, Russia has air superiority,
but they haven't been able to get it.
Right.
That's the thing. They do not have air superiority in Ukraine. That's insane to me. Okay, they have they have military capability, Jeff. Like their type of weapons that they have. They actually have a bomb right now that is considered a war crime. And we can get into what it does, but and that's what I was concerned about, what was going to be utilized, because if Russia does utilize that or a nuke, it's war tribunals. We will come and find your generals. Like
yeah, here's the pattern that they do is, before they take a city, this is, historically, right, based on what we know about their military strategy, is if they want to take a city that they necessarily don't care about, they level the city, like they did in Syria, right? Like that's how they handle. Like they're not worried about an insurgency because they just level the city, bomb it.
But they're not doing.
But they're not doing that here. So yeah,
they're not doing that in Kiev because Kiev actually has a lot of older historical Russian sites in it.
So I'm curious why, but I'm curious why they haven't done that yet. Because there's got to be a mentality. If
Russian, like Putin is a revanchist sort of dude. Like he loves the Russian nationalist part of this piece. It's the reason why he wants to bring Ukraine in. So if he goes into Kiev and destroys the entire city down to rubble, it's not like the Nazis in like Poland where they don't give a fuck about Poland, right? He cares about the historical aspect of Kiev and what it means to the Russian Empire. I'm hoping he doesn't level Kiev. That would be stupid on his part. But I don't know. That's the thing. They're bombing and, Kiev, and they're trying to roll tanks in. They're kind of fighting this urban warfare on a weird front. They're trying to roll tanks into Kiev. They had like 200, I think, last night go, and they lost a lot.
Well, what I was saying before, the technology that exists now, compared to say a decade or two prior, and it existed, but it's more prevalent and better, where you have shoulder-fired missiles that can take out a tank, and shoulder-fired missiles that can take out aircraft.
Yeah, the javelins.
So I'm not saying it renders air power.
We're sending many over there.
Right. Right. That'll take. Tanks are slow and they're on the ground and you can see them, and you fire a missile from around a corner and take it out. Aircraft a little tougher. They're moving faster, but still you can take them out with a shoulder-fired rocket. That's an amazing, advance. We gave this to the Afghanis when they invaded Russia in the 80s, but that is a huge advantage that we did. You don't take into consideration when you say, look at Russia's air superiority. Well, okay, but if we're taking a few of them out with javelins, even if you miss 3 out of 4 shots, it's a javelin missile on their shoulder compared to a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment that's flying through the sky. So there's hope. I was hoping, obviously, that this didn't take place. I didn't think Putin would move in because of all the things that are sort of taking shape now. Protests in Russia, who would have thought the Russian people would actually come out and protest? If they have to. See, the thing is, if they
it has to take a lot. So Putin, I think the internal politics of Russia probably need to be discussed here. Putin rigs elections. That's how he maintains power. Okay. He jails political opponents. We all know this. He's surrounded by oligarchs who financially support him. Mm-hmm. And the West targeting those oligarchs needed to happen, but it needed to happen where they isolate those oligarchs in Russia. Okay. So that means the UK needed to act in order to push those people, because those oligarchs all hold dual citizenship, probably in the UK, so they can be in London, or they maybe France or anything like that. They'll have their mega yachts on the south in the Mediterranean. So that means that we needed Europe to act. Okay. So within Russia, you have all of the oligarchs Putin rigs elections, but that means that he's isolated
from the population. Unstable too. Like it's. I mean,
the British tabloids have talked about Putin having a neurological disease for a long time. We don't know what it is, and Marco Rubio alluded to it on his Twitter feed.
Aside from that, though, I think that situation where he has rigged elections, the oligarchs in place, I don't think that the government is that strong or has that tight a grip.
Because the prime minister of Russia, was it Meldilev?
I thought it was Medvedev.
Medvedev.
Yeah.
Literally not even in the same party, but there is his right-hand man. Okay. They're both corrupt. Which is what pissed me off when Obama was like the breathing room comment, or what was it? The refresher comment after the election in 2012. He said
I'll have more room to, after the election, I'll have more. I forget what exactly he said. Right.
After the election, I'll have more room to talk or something.
Yeah.
Which was a deplorable comment. And Obama knows that. He has to know that. That was one of the reasons why Trump came into power, essentially. And so I don't think in Russia, Putin has as much support as he thinks he does. I think he does in the rural areas. Definitely has the support of the Chechens, and maybe some in these, separatist areas close to Ukraine. But in the cities, no.
So you mentioned I think we should, a good segue from previously, that they're isolating the oligarchs. The sanctions, I guess Europe is leading the way and Biden is leading from behind. Yeah. So now Europe is getting tougher on the sanctions. They're going in one direction, at least the right direction of getting tougher rather than pulling back. But still Biden is, oh boy. I mean, the whole administration, it's laughable how little they comprehend what's actually taking place and how the progressive woke mindset has infected their brain into foreign policy, thinking that things that don't matter actually matter.
You need to, so if diplomacy doesn't work, you need to use realpolitik, and that's what your practical matters. You need to do what's best for the nation at that point. Right. What's best for the nation is cutting off Russian oil and fracking our own. The day that Kiev was invaded, Biden decided to not sign off on new fracking oil permits, okay, in several places, over climate change. And I think a lot of people need to understand that we support clean energy. We support nuclear energy infrastructure being built. I've said it many times. It is the cleanest form of energy. We need to utilize it. We don't need to be looking into solar panels from China. That's too slow. Build our own infrastructure, okay? That's a nationalist point of view, isn't it, Jeff? And so to strengthen our own energy portfolio. Right now, we're importing Russian oil. And it needs to be said right now that Biden could have stopped this importation at any point. He is right now trying to have a workaround on the SWIFT banking system in order to keep paying for it.
18 months. It's very important that we all understand this. Everybody understand this. 18 months ago, we were energy independent.
Yes.
18 months ago, we were energy independent.
This is
and we are not energy independent. We are our energy independence didn't change because factors in the real, factors of energy supply changed or logistics or anything like that. We decided, we made a decision to become dependent on foreign energy within the last 12 months.
And this, okay, so and that's the thing that people need to understand. What Putin was doing into Western Europe was using domestic energy issues. So let's say Germany wants to move from nuclear to renewables, but you still need that base load. That base load is natural gas and oil, okay? And still coal, because they're still the most sustainable source of energy. To get that other part of it, so what they tried to do is, do solar and wind and all this other stuff. Nonsense. But instead of buying, in order to make that switch, they wanted more Russian oil. Okay, so what Russia does is it exploits empty portions of energy portfolios in Western Europe in order to create a sphere of influence on energy. Okay, and that put Europe into a tight spot on this. Okay, you've seen Germany's politics shift overnight, Jeff. Okay, completely. I mean, and you won't know. Twitter knows. Germany sucks. Okay, they suck as a country, and I've been ringing that bell for a few years now.
Kudos for them. Kudos to them, at least for doing the 180, because maybe and this is only a maybe in 6 months, the Democrats wake up and go, okay, maybe we should, we'll pull out all these ridiculous moratoriums we have on drilling on federal land, on new fracking. I mean, they probably won't, but they should.
They're probably trying to do it to lessen the brunt of midterms.
I don't know that it's going to happen in time like that. That they won't be, but they don't have the center of gravity in their party to do Republican things that would make their political prospects better. And if you've noticed,
very true.
If you notice in the past week or so, the libs I follow have been super quiet. They're not really saying much because they know what a bad spot they're in and know how bad Biden is doing. There are some who try to say that, Trump this, Trump that, or Trump caused this, and some such nonsense, ignoring the fact that their president, their party's president, has been in power for a year. So they know this. I don't. What do you do if you're just for pure political power? You would think, hey, the energy thing's like something we really have to address, and they're like, no, climate change, boo. People will suffer.
There's real world consequences. Okay. Yeah. So we were slow to act on Russia putting their troops on the border, even though Biden was yelling it for like months. And the thing is when you're yelling that, okay, when you're yelling that and freaking out Ukraine, that Russia's on your border, we have intel that they could invade.
Well,
if that's the case, you should be sending the U.S. military in order to ensure that the Ukrainian military is capable and ready. Okay, you can do that beforehand and it not be an escalation of war.
And apparently you should not tell the Chinese to help out, who then leak that information to the Russians. Did I cut you off? I'm sorry. I had to jump into there because that holy shit. I mean,
that was very angry. So Biden has been very naive on the Chinese threat and what they're. So I don't understand this very antiquated thinking that the Russians and the Chinese totally hate each other. They don't totally hate each other anymore.
It's naive or corrupt.
Russia is very much becoming China's gas station. Okay, they just built a new pipeline. They just made a deal in early February. Okay, so when the Biden administration goes to Z or Chinese Foreign Ministry and says, here's all the plans and intel we've got, and then literally China is going to go as they're creating these pipeline plans with Russia and give this intel to them. What were you thinking?
I think
he wasn't clearly, but
he's not. I mean, not necessarily thinking, but I don't put it past the corrupt aspects of this. Now, if we circle back to prior to the election, and even shortly thereafter, who was Hunter Biden involved with?
China
and the Ukrainians. Okay, so you have a president in office
and he was involved with Ukrainians that were corrupt towards Russia.
Towards Russia, getting kickbacks. This has to come into play. This has to factor into your decision-making calculus if you're one of the Bidens. You have this gross, corrupt relationship with the Ukrainians and the Chinese in two of the most sensitive areas of the world, and your decision-making ability is compromised through that corruption. I know the mainstream media doesn't want to look at this stuff, But at what point does anybody just take stop, doing, Republican pounce stories or
they're never going to
yeah, I mean, like, it's
interesting. I do have to make this point, Jeff. It's interesting that they keep doing these Republican pound stories and it never changes, because when Kiev was attacked on Thursday night, Mitt Romney put out a statement that I think was probably his most political statement he's ever done, that's really hit hard back. Mitt Romney's not the type that was going to, gloat and all of that stuff. But he basically said, he was like, you know what? When I said that Russia is a geopolitical foe and we should be paying attention to what they're doing, you all said the 1980s called and wanted their foreign policy back. Right. That was a dig. And you all should have listened to us, the Republicans, on foreign policy, because we're right. I don't know how naive Democrats have to be in order to, in the moment, not take it seriously. And then when something bad happens, try to say, oh, I was right in then and there, or the Republicans were right 5 years earlier. You need to be serious people. Okay, we're begging you to be serious people.
They can't. This is the problem. We're stuck with this. We're stuck with the lack of seriousness and the weakness of it. These are weak people, and I mean, you have Elizabeth Warren tweeting about
the most unserious person in Massachusetts,
and John Kerry tweeting about climate change, or speaking about how this will affect climate change. You have Elizabeth Warren tweeting about nonsense and sort of tying in. Yeah, so these are unserious, but they're weak. But they're weak people because they don't get it. And a Republican can point out, that the sky is blue, and that we actually have a problem here. You have to address it, and it's because it comes from us. Their automatic reaction is to just shut down and behave like a child stomping their feet. And well, if they pointed it out, then it must be bad and evil, and I'm going to ignore it. This is who we're dealing with. This is who we're dealing with all the time. Republican foreign policy, and Mitt Romney in particular, in 2012, was correct. And I've heard like Ben Dominic was like, oh, no, it's always been China, and this is, I'm like, no, 10 years ago.
That's binary.
But even so.
You can have two opinions at one time.
Correct.
China is absolutely our foe, but the issue is that we have never faced a Russia and China where they are in partnership on their energy prospects. That is a huge, big thing that these people need to take seriously. You can think both are dangerous for separate reasons. Russia's is very much regional, okay? China, though, is a huge issue in the Pacific, and the way that they are aggressive on Taiwan. Literally, when they bombed Kiev, immediately the next morning, what do I hear about? China sending 9 planes over into Taiwan's airspace, okay? Right. They know that we're weak. And the thing is like, we need to start thinking about acknowledging Taiwan as a country and fucking China. Okay. Like, we just need to start thinking about this. It needs to be more prominent.
10 years ago, it was debatable who was the number one geopolitical foe, because that was the question asked at the debate, right? That was the question asked at the debate. Who's number one? Okay, it's debatable. You say China, there's an argument to be made.
I don't even remember
Russia.
What Obama said.
I know he just went on his tangent about 1980s. Like that's what he deflected. He didn't answer that, and Romney was like Russia. Now, 10 years ago, I would say now our number one geopolitical foe is China. Number two being Russia, but 10 years ago is debatable which is which. Argument for both, but there's a lot of Monday.
I would say the conglomerate of both is our greatest geopolitical
correct.
foe.
But there's some Monday morning quarterbacking going on from some folks on the right who was like, Romney was wrong back then because he didn't say China. It's like, no, it was a debatable point and a perfectly acceptable answer. And now we're actually seeing it because, look, I mean, Putin's still in charge, decades later, and we're reaping the weak foreign. We're reaping the yield of the weak foreign policy of Democrats who think that here's the thing. Their mindset is it's fascinating to me because they think because they're there that once they speak to them, they'll be reasonable, right? There's this weird mindset that they don't seem to get what other countries which have existed for thousands of years and who have not operated
they don't give a fuck about
Yeah.
talking to you. They operate under realpolitik, and when we go in with our moral considerations and all this other stuff, when it comes to these countries that have deep histories with deep cultures like Iran, China, and Russia, and we want to, I mean, they don't give a fuck about that. We need to be honest about that. Okay. This is the reason why they think the West has gotten fat and lazy, because we rely on this. Okay. It's not untrue. Okay. But the thing is that we need to change our ways, shape up, work on domestic policies to ensure our borders are secure. And that we have, good domestic policies that keep us strong. Not saying that we need to get rid of liberalism or all that. I think that we just need to ensure that our country is strong. But at the same time, we need to use realpolitik in the way that we conduct foreign policy with these other countries. We need to push Europe to be strong. Okay, because we were pushing Europe to be weak.
But here's the thing about that. For that to happen, for that to be workable, we have to get our own house in order from a couple levels. One, we talked about energy independence, return to energy independence. Okay, that's a given.
Yes.
But also
we want that.
But also fiscally, right? We can't keep inflating our currency, being in debt, and having that instability going on. You shore up those two aspects. We're actually solid, so we're on strong footing.
Yeah.
At that point, you have more leverage because you can say, all right, we'll export natural gas to Europe. So you won't have to rely on the Russians, which ergo isolates them more and gives the West more power. Same thing with China. You're not borrowing money from them, so you have more leverage when it comes to what counts. Because, I don't want to call them necessarily paper tigers, but the Chinese economy,
there's something going on there that it's quite hard to put like a handle on. Their state control economy is not as strong as I think that people or
Correct.
They like to promote it as.
Correct.
Right now they do have their version of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that seems to be building real estate that has a lot of debt. And so I know that was it last year. That company, is it Everland?
I don't know the name, but to that point,
it's a real estate company. And because of how much the Chinese government had invested into this company, the fate of this company and its debt was tied to the Chinese government. So they were trying to, because the collapse of it, they were saying could have caused a global recession, essentially. And that did not happen. But I don't think China's fiscal situation is what people are saying it is.
Correct. And because of those things, if we get our own,
and we know Russia's not
right, but if we get our house in order, and especially with Russia, if we were energy independent, and we could,
Putin does not want our energy, does not want to be energy.
Right. So the price of oil would collapse, and you could break the back of the Russian economy. Same thing with China. If we weren't borrowing trillions of dollars, we would be able to have more leverage in any type of situation where it could get tense.
Wasn't it during the early phases of COVID that the price of oil just collapsed, and Trump actually made this good point, and Schumer blocked it because he's a fucking idiot, where Trump was like, the price of oil has collapsed. Russia's practically paying us to get it. Why don't we take the Russian oil for free and put it in our strategic reserves? And Schumer blocked it. It was free. They would have been paying us to take it. Yes, we want your oil if it's free, to put in our reserves, you fucking morons who overproduced during a pandemic. And Schumer blocked it. That makes no sense to me. And then everyone, literally we had a Democratic congressman during all of this begging OPEC to produce more oil.
Yeah.
And we're in a point of begging OPEC again. Is this like the early double zeros?
Or 1979. I mean, this is how the inflation, energy shortages. This is what happens. I heard the commentary podcast, commentary magazine podcast, and
Noah Rothman's
awesome, but John
Podolak we love commentary.
But he had a good point. It's like they're resurrecting the 1970s, right? High crime for decades. For a decade, right? Throughout the 70s and 80s, massive inflation, energy shortages, and then you had, electoral disaster, and their party was adrift for a couple decades while Reagan took over and became Ronald Reagan. And
we want Ron to be that, guys. We want Ron DeSantis to be that,
and not Trump, And look, the thing is, he's gonna lose. He's gonna lose. That's just the one thing we'll do that could absolutely blow it. And there's a lot of baby boomers and a lot of unserious people on the right who are still pushing this. They're not in, and they're kind of always kept on the outside. But if we want to be serious about our issues, and we've kind of drifted away from Ukraine here, but if we want to be serious about taking care of what we need to take care of, we need somebody who can actually get the job done. And believe it or not, Ann Coulter, of all people, tweeted today. It's like, Trump says he's going to do this, but he didn't build the wall. He didn't do like 4 things that she mentioned out of it that he said he was going to promise to do, and basically, calling him out as being a hypocrite and all talk and no action. But we have almost three full years of the Biden administration left. I don't know that they're capable of course correction.
They're not. I think we need to be real about that. Yeah. I mean, Biden right now, his polling is going sub 40. And I think this Ukraine situation has a lot to do with that, because the United States is expecting him to be more aggressive without intervention. And so, yeah, I mean, I thought the floor for Biden was going to be probably 41, because, the Dems are super polarized and they have been since the 90s, but it's going down. But I think that they're still going to have a solid 45% vote for Democrats regardless. So we're going to see whether or not we have crossovers to vote Republican based on how shitty Biden is. That's what I'm seeing from the data. We'll see.
I don't want to get into predictions because unfortunately I was wrong about Putin going into Ukraine, and I do really hope the Russians lose. I want them to lose. I would love for.
I think Putin's on a time clock, Jeff.
I mean, this is the thing. Like this stuff. The longer these things drag out, the worse it
doesn't work out well for the invading military. I mean. It took 20 years with Afghanistan, but that's technically a loss for us.
But if you're, the bigger thing with that is like right now, you see these videos, who knows what to believe online, right? And I'm very skeptical about what I see. I always take it with, a spoonful of salt when I see the videos, because apparently you saw the ghost of Kiev, right? So I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. This is fighter pilots taking out all. But
didn't believe that. I didn't believe that.
Right. And then, you hear about it's fake. Yeah. Because it's just, storybook ending or storybook type of scenario. So then I saw this morning they want to meet with some diplomats in Belarus on the border, about a ceasefire. I don't know. But we talked about this on the Patreon episode, and I guess at the beginning here, that the Ukrainians are very closely tied with the Russian people. So it's not like going into Afghanistan. I don't know if the morale of these troops can last a sustained conflict. It certainly doesn't appear that way. I mean, if I'm seeing these videos of Russian soldiers being captured and they're saying, like, I don't know why I was here. I don't really want to fight anybody. And then, a lot of them getting killed. even though Ukrainians are taking casualties. The Russians seem to be taking quite a few too. So that certainly,
the Russians have already taken more casualties in this than we did in Afghanistan for 20 years.
No, I mean,
they've taken, according to what I read this morning, 4,300 casualties.
Wow,
that's a lot of people.
That's a lot in 3 days.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, if that's to be believed, yeah.
That's from the Kiev Independent. Yeah.
Look, there is a motivation for, if you're pro-Ukrainian, to inflate or exaggerate or flat out lie, right? We know that to keep morale up. We'll find out. But
a lot. I mean, I think even over 2,500 is a lot.
Right. So this is what I was saying. Like, in the fog of war, lots of things happen that you don't think are going to happen. Like, all of a sudden, spontaneous protests are up. Who knows where that could lead? Maybe they'll be crushed and it'll go back to normal. But maybe people have had enough, and Putin is deposed, not through military intervention by the United States, you libertarian idiots, because I can already hear him talking about it. You're like, oh, well, what does that mean?
No, it's very important that the Ukrainians defend their own country, defend their own sovereignty, defend their own culture, defend their own.
Correct.
They need to do this without the United States in order to ensure that their sovereignty is defended independently.
Right.
And they're doing the best job they can right now.
Yeah.
So we're behind them.
So a lot more to talk about. I do want to say, for folks who are politically minded and want to be politically involved, and are uncomfortable with some Putin sympathetic people on the right, you need to speak up, challenge them, because they are a small minority. Yeah.
We're with you. Yeah, those Putin lovers are a small minority. Putin right now is isolated himself. He's not in a good position strategically, isolated from the West, which is what he needs in order to be strong. He has to rely on China, and China's probably not very happy with him. It seems like China wants him to back down. And so we'll see, Jeff. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen, but we stand with Ukraine.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if this shifts from Putin going from like, well, I was going to take Ukraine, to now I'm going to pull out of Ukraine to make sure that I can still maintain my power in Mother Russia, because that's a very real possibility. After what
you're going to deal with some angry Russian moms who lost their sons in Ukraine fighting their own brothers. Good luck, bud.
Well, certainly hope Russia loses. God bless the people of Ukraine. I hope they stay safe and get out of this intact. All right. We're going to end this episode. A bit of a somber one. Usually we like to have a little bit of fun on this podcast, but not today. Anyway, we will be back soon enough with our episode 51, hopefully with some better news to report. All right, everybody, have a great week. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.